Thank you so very much for this day and for coming. I have a lot of thank yous to say, and in order to organize it, I wrote it. So I'm going to read 3 poems, but first I'm going to do these thanks. At the library, I'd like to thank Denise Stevens, Vice Provost and University Librarian. Where's Denise? To Nadia Gassetti, Associate University Librarian, and to Joel Miner, Curator of the Modern Literature Collection and Manuscripts, plus all of the people in alumni and development who help put these kinds of events together and this event together. I'm deeply touched by their belief that this material in the other room has value, and by the fact that they devote their careers to preserving what others might consider scrap paper and photographs and notebooks that look at best like what you'd find in a low-end collectible shop. Carl Phillips. I am incredibly grateful that in 1999, reading as widely as he always has and knowing as many poets as he knows, all of whom would have felt extremely fortunate to have a tenure-track job at Washington University, he had confidence in me, a poet with 1 book. Whom he'd met only briefly on one occasion in New York City at a tribute reading for Langston Hughes at the 92nd Street Y. I am and will ever be grateful. I took a half a Xanax thinking that would help, but I should have taken the whole thing. Grateful for his support in inviting me to teach here and his support for my being granted tenure. Teaching here has made the work that followed the first books possible, but Carl also taught me a tremendous amount, about teaching and about choosing the students we invite to come here, about making a community for them and a place for all of us writers. Whatever I've accomplished in these last 18 years is due to being invited here by Carl and teaching with him and his support for me and my work. The English department. Dan Shea, who made the call to the University of Montana, where I was teaching, to invite me to come here for an interview. Miriam Balin, who was the chair when I arrived a year later after a fellowship at Princeton, to both of them for their steadfast support of me and the program. To David Lawton, who oversaw my tenure case and who, when I asked whether we might pool the MFA graduate student fellowships in those days, some people had a quarter, some people had a half fellowship, a few had all. We wanted to equalize that. He said, let's just give everyone full fellowships. Those were the days. To Vince Sherry, whose own love of poetry makes him a friend to all poets and to this creative writing program. To Wolfram Smigden for his support of the program, and now to Vince Sherry again. My sincerest thanks to all of these people for their often thankless service in being chairs and for their support of creative writing programs and the writing faculty. I also want to thank the faculty with whom I teach for your collegiality and for how much I learn from all of you. I want to thank these 4 former students who have participated in the event: Aaron Coleman, Cassie Danish, Aditi Machado, Justin Philip Reed. They are all very busy now with their own writing lives. They're all 4 exceptional poets, and they already have had their own successes. This is what every teacher hopes for, that their students, once they leave, will go on to realize their ambitions and the hopes we had for them. In addition to these 4, I thank all my former students. Teaching makes one smarter, not only about teaching itself, but about whatever subjects you teach. I've learned so much about poetry by having to translate what I know into the language with which I speak to students. And I've had to learn more and more about poetry in order to keep up with them as they get smarter and smarter. And the current students, who will soon be former students, I learn every day from you and am touched by your confidence in me and in the program. Family, friends, especially those present here, also those in distant places and past lives. I could go on forever. And to two particular friends, it's all too difficult. Can't I just write a poem? Timothy Donnelly, it was his idea to use the magnetic poetry kit, and they weren't circular. How could you write a poem? They were big cookie sheets. And yes, it was amazing because it taught me the lesson that it's not the words you know, but how you put them together. Because we sat next to each other, and the poem that he constructed was inimitably a Timothy Donnelly poem. And the poem that I wrote was a Mary Jo Bang poem. And how could that be, I thought, but now I saw. Because we had divided the words randomly, although we did then institute a reach around which said that if you saw in somebody else's pile a word you wanted, you could ask to purchase it, but you had to pay 4 tiles to get it. So to those particular friends who are here tonight and who are here in my mind, even when they aren't physically here, Timothy Donnelly and Mark Bibbins. I met Timothy in 1994 at the end of my first year in the MFA program at Columbia. And as he told the group earlier, we bonded over a shared knowledge of something called Spanish bar cake, which could be purchased only at Kroger. But the cake was only proof that we shared a deeper knowledge about what it is to be in the world. I met Mark Bibbins a year or 2 later. We found one another through a mutual poet friend. Over the years in New York City, as the 3 of us became poets, we built friendships that no longer depend on living in the same city. Poets find one another. They recognize in one another a like-mindedness that lessens the sense of being alone in a chaotic world, doing this odd thing we do of putting down one's odd thoughts on paper and then stepping back to see whether we got it right. And last, libraries in general. I was 6 or 7 when a bookmobile stopped on the tar and gravel road outside our house. I must have been encouraged to come inside because I did nothing without permission. I picked up a book to look at and was told I could take it home, which was confusing. The woman inside said they would come back in 2 weeks and I could return that one and take another. Oh, brave new world that has such objects in it. That day began a long association with books and libraries. Ferguson Library, the St. Louis Public Library, every library at every university I attended, and in every city in which I ever lived. Evanston, Chicago, Philadelphia, London, New York City. And this Olin Library. That my papers are here is beyond imagining. I'm going to read 3 poems as a way to avoid bursting into tears. And that's often what poems are for. This poem was constructed out of words chosen from the last 50 pages of Mrs. Dalloway. And the last sentence of Mrs. Dalloway is, "There she was." Somebody says, "Where's Clarissa?" There she was. So this poem is called There She Was. And I always think of it as my most cheerful poem ever. The house stood. The cars were standing. She was walking over to the dog, which had to be remembered. "Shake hands," she said. He straightened, bent, straightened. His manner was irreproachable. that being with a tail. It was extraordinary, life was. Furs being petted, people standing upright, panic, fear, tight skirts, ankles, thought. The creature standing, her giving little pats. She was enjoying standing there. She'd forgotten this feeling, ordinary things, curtains, biscuits, bones, a creature raising one foreleg, the movies. She stood looking as if she would solidify, Darwin draped in black, remembering the flora or fauna. Of course, she would only really be remembering a garden, trees, wallpaper, a sea lion barking, a doctor of misery on the verge of difficulty, a boy gone, death, death without life, terror, fear, disaster, punishment, profound darkness, evening. She walked to the window, sky, clouds coming into the room. How odd, she thought, to be. And now, one poem from Adolphe Throwing, and then I'll finish with a new poem. So this poem is called A Numbered Graph, that shows how each part of the body would fit into a chair, based on a graph I found in the Getty Research Archives in the Bauhaus Papers collection. I was born awake and knowing, and time keeps proving this. Men have reasons for breaking the rules. For me, thinking has always been a logical process of if this, then that. I fit into a chair. I sit in a room. I split in two. My body behaves, but my mind resists. It's a simple truth that one can occupy two places at one time while sitting in a chair. The same way a posable doll can be divided from her dress. It's also true that time will mesh us together. Until then, there's another city on the other side of this wall. A list listing reordered details might read like this: light, glass, a metal stairway, one woman sitting on the sill of a window, me in a chair, my feet on the floor, face forward, arm bent, the very best of the body tucked into place. But we are not dolls. We feel. We make mistakes. I also want to thank everyone who is here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being interested in poetry. You're a rare breed. And in books, an increasingly rare breed. Some identical twin sister, one step ahead. The day shimmers with silver bouncing off the surface of a pond-sized July. Some identical twin sister, one step ahead, looking back without stopping. Can time keep capturing an animal even after it's turned itself in? Cell block of an instant, mugshot of an afternoon fawn, a disappearance at the border of a forest, a bed of narrow-gauge needles, a sparkling pool at the park's edge, a botanical garden defined by the never-ending echo of a deco clock, the ornamental myth of floral love carried over moment by moment, repeating ad infinitum. You point to something, the doll in the side yard, her plastic teeth perfect in moonlight. You open your mouth to let the hush in. You and she dressed alike, invisible, luminous blue. When asked, you'll make manifest your ideal smile, your adaptable funhouse face. Punishment will find you when a fever fractures into pieces the durable rod of your long-standing spine. A coat slips from your shoulders, in its pocket, the magical half-tab you're waiting to take. Rimbaud to Verlaine, in ink, in a folded letter. You have to be a seer to see. What you really want is to be a camera, documenting the height you're about to fall from. Thank you so much.